Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Everything a Lady Is Not, by Sawyer North, narrated by Carmen Rose. Prologue. 1805, Oxfordshire, England. The arrival of important visitors drove Henry into his secret fortress, a tiny chamber tucked behind a hidden panel in the library. Though cramped and dusty, it provided the perfect refuge for a sullen and wounded 12-year-old. A narrow slit of window above him admitted early afternoon light that battled the festering shadows. "Why did you leave me alone, Mother?" he whispered. She did not answer, long dead as she was. Resigned to solitude, he turned his attention to a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe and began reading where he had stopped during his previous withdrawal. So intent was his focus that he dropped the book when a girl spoke. "Are you the boy?" His eyes darted toward the panel door to find a young girl peeking through the opening. "How did you find me?" She seemed to accept the question as an invitation to enter. Before he could formulate a plan to repel the invasion, she slipped inside, pressed the panel closed, and seated herself atop a stack of books. She sat very primly, with hands clasped in her lap, her russet brown hair framing a confident expression. "The answer is simple, really." Henry cocked his head before realizing she was answering his question. "I was informed that there might be a boy here near my age. When I did not see you, I asked your whereabouts from your sister. Charlotte." "Yes, Charlotte. She is very kind and quite pretty." He nodded, but did not speak, so the intruder continued. "She directed me to your secret hiding place and suggested that a visit would not be unwelcome. I slipped away before Father could decide otherwise." Henry stared askance at the strange girl, bewildered by her forward manner and sophistication. "Just how old are you?" She placed a hand to her mouth and giggled. "9, this past autumn, although I have been told that such a question to a lady is improper. I do not know why. No one will tell me." "I don't know why either. I am Henry, by the way, second son of the Earl of Ravenshew. And you were called Margaret?" She dipped her chin and giggled again. "Nobody calls me Margaret, silly. My father calls me Lucy, after a noblewoman he greatly admires. You may call me that as well." He scratched his chin. "Should I not call you Lady something or another instead? Would not the Marquis be offended?" "I think not. My father is less noble than you might believe." The impugning description intrigued Henry. "How so?" She sighed heavily. "Do you know why he is here to visit your sister's husband?" When he shook his head, she leaned near and spoke with an air of conspiracy. "His father, the Duke of Ramsbury, arranged a marriage for him. However, instead of wedding his betrothed, he eloped with a beautiful barmaid and fled to Italy to escape his father's anger. I was born in Florence, so I have been in exile my entire life." She averted her eyes as sadness briefly took hold. However, she recovered to face him again. "The Duke is attempting to disinherit him, and some on the Committee of Privileges are considering his argument. We have visited many members of that committee, such as your brother-in-law, to argue otherwise." She leaned back again and refolded her hands. "See? Not so noble after all. You calling me Lucy will not offend him in the least." Henry gawked at her easy command of language. She seemed twice her stated age. In the silence that followed, they glanced furtively at each other. He finally broke the stalemate. "I have many books here, but none that would interest you." "Oh? Such as?" He retrieved his dropped book from the floor and showed her the cover. She clapped her hands gleefully. "Robinson Crusoe! My favourite!" His face twisted in disbelief. "Really?" "Oh, yes. He was a castaway also, but his misfortunes turned out well for him." Henry grinned in agreement, feeling very much like a castaway himself. "Right. Do you want to read it together?" She nodded happily, so he read aloud from the place of interruption. They alternated the reading of chapters until both were squinting in the fading light of late afternoon. Charlotte intervened before darkness swallowed them completely, her face appearing from behind the panel door. "There you are," she said to Lucy. Your party is set to leave so that you may reach the inn before nightfall. Your father is concerned about your whereabouts. You should bid Henry goodbye." Lucy stood and curtsied awkwardly to Henry. "Farewell, Friday. Perhaps we will meet again some day." He stood and bowed stiffly. "Perhaps." She ducked from the room, but Charlotte continued to eye him. "Are you coming?" He sat down again. Charlotte held him in her gaze a moment longer. "I see. I will save supper for you then." She closed the panel, and he heard her footsteps pad away. Left again to solitude, he remained in his fortress until long after the guests had departed. However, his thoughts kept returning to the odd but engaging Lucy, daughter of the heir to a dukedom and fellow exile. He even smiled. Chapter 1. June, 1816. Shooter's Hill, England. Lucy had never intended to become a highwayman. She had, however, become terribly lost. As a result, she sat astride a horse alongside 3 disreputable men in a huddle of trees just below the crest of Shooter's Hill, while waiting for the world to explode. "Chin up, Lucy Locket." She raised her eyes to find Stedman regarding her with a rakish grin. Though 2 years past 30, her long-time guardian retained the devastating looks that had earned him the title of Beaumont highwayman and the admiration of women of all classes. His smile, however, remained powerless against Lucy. "You promised," she said with accusation. His eyebrows arched slowly. "This again?" "Yes, this again." She prodded her mount nearer to his and lowered her voice. "The day you found me at the river, you swore me an oath. In exchange for my compliance, you would never again engage in highway robbery. Was it just a lie to a lost child?" Stedman glanced sidelong at his accomplices, who tried to pretend disinterest in the conversation. His mirth fled. "Circumstances change, girl. Lord Colvin championed the new game laws. Now a poor man wishing to prevent his family from starving can be transported halfway across the world to a prison colony, simply for snaring a pheasant. It is our ethical duty to liberate a hoard of gold from that heartless lord, to distribute it among those he seeks to starve. Can we not burgle empty country houses as we did some years ago, or find other methods of parting callous gentlefolk from their riches?" He shook his head. "No, my dear. Such ventures produce lightly and jeopardize greatly. If I am to risk the gallows, I must do so in pursuit of a small fortune." She presented her cheek to him as anger knotted her jaw. "Do not grit your teeth, Lucy," he chided gently. "The expression is far too masculine for one as fair as you." She exhaled a huff of breath. "Why did you insist on bringing me along, then? Why not leave me in the wilds of Dartmoor, as you always have?" "Truth?" "Truth." He crossed his hands over the saddle and leaned toward her. "I was afraid that when I returned you would be gone." "Gone? Why now? Why after all these years?" His smile returned, wistful this time. "Because you are a grown woman now, nearly 21. Because I have taught you how to survive, and you have proved an excellent pupil. Because I have seen the yearning in your eyes of late." "Yearning?" Her eyes widened in surprise. Had he guessed her thoughts? "What yearning?" "To be free. Free of me. Free of my associates. Free of the excuse of a life I have given you." His ever-present smile became a memory. "I am sorry, Lucy." She blinked rapidly. For what?" Before he could answer, Stedman's eyes flicked away, and his body tensed. The unmistakable clatter of carriage wheels drew nearer. He motioned sharply to his mates, who readied their horses. Then he leaned once more toward her. "Remain here, out of sight. Be ready to fly when the job is finished." She nodded dully. Where else could she go at this juncture? Apparently satisfied, Stedman turned to watch the road. Within moments, Lord Colvin's ornate carriage sailed by. With a shout, Stedman drew a purple scarf to cover most of his face, and drove his horse onto the road. His accomplices bolted after him. The fleeting glimpse of the grand vehicle, complete with 4 white horses, 2 drivers, and 2 footmen, stirred long-forgotten memories in Lucy. Images of her real father trickled through her recollection, of the time they had travelled the dusty roads of England together, birds of a feather, thick as thieves. Unexpected tears pricked her eyes. She wiped them away and nudged her horse nearer to the road. Dust raised by the passing carriage hung in the breeze as the staccato footfalls of the team and pursuers faded on the climb up Shooter's Hill. She launched a silent prayer that no violence would befall anyone in the minutes to come, robber and robbed alike. The echo of raised voices marked the moment of intercept. She gripped the reins tighter and moved to the edge of the trees, concerned over the unseen events. Dismal memories of the day Stedman and his men had scattered what remained of her family, even if inadvertently, threatened to overcome her. The shouting settled into barely overheard commands as Lucy peered up the road, but the ambush remained hidden by the trees and a gentle bend of the highway. She watched anyway, seemingly for an hour, until another sound stole her attention. She swiveled her head to survey the road in the opposite direction. Within seconds, the sound revealed its origin as 4 men on horseback, talking loudly, advanced at a trot up the road. Even as she watched, the troop appeared to realize what was happening ahead and broke into a gallop. The bright red waistcoats of the charging men identified them immediately. She spurred her horse toward the carriage, shouting warning, "Robin Redbreasts! Robin Redbreasts!" By the time Lucy rounded the curve and came upon the carriage, Stedman was strapping the last coin bag to the pack-horse. His eyes were wide with alarm. "Robin Redbreasts!" she repeated, just in case he had not understood. "4 approaching at full tilt." Stedman immediately began shouting to his men. "Take to the woods to lead them off. Lucy and I will pull the pack-horse. We rally at the appointed location." In the chaos, the footmen and drivers dove into the trees, leaving the terrified Lord Colvin cowering in his carriage. Lucy was too frightened to empathize. As the pair of accomplices disappeared into the woods on the opposite side of the road, she pressed her mount into the trees behind Stedman, thankful that he had allowed her to wear breeches instead of a dress. The conventional position astride her mount allowed her to lay prone as the horse squeezed beneath branches that flew at her with abandon. She focused doggedly on the horse ahead, while wondering if this was how her peculiar journey would end, one way or another. Henry Beaumont's comrades chattered idly, as they had for the entire ride from London before Stevens mustered the audacity to ask him the question. "Beaumont, is it true you are the 2nd son of an earl?" Henry nodded, having expected the question for 2 days. "Yes." Despite already knowing the answer, the 3 men seemed surprised. Stevens cocked his head and frowned. "And yet you ride with the Bow Street Horse Patrol. It seems rather beneath your station, particularly after your heroics at Waterloo." Henry had learned from his days in the cavalry that only frankness would end the uncomfortable line of questioning. "My brother banished me the day he became an earl. Now, in my penniless state, Bow Street is as good an option as any." He did not explain the rest. That his was a corrupt soul, destined for the abyss, and his exile was the inevitable result. That the war against France had merely honed his killer instinct. That, desperate to avoid his dismal destiny, he had joined Bow Street after the war. Perhaps hunting criminals would prevent him from becoming one. Perhaps fighting the darkness would prevent it from consuming him. As the road began climbing Shooter's Hill, his soul-searching was bluntly interrupted by familiar sounds on the highway ahead. Conflict. "Listen," Henry whispered sharply as he peered up the road. "Something is happening up there." The sound of strident voices became clearly audible when the men fell silent. As one, they pulled flintlocks and spurred their mounts into a gallop. Within seconds, a horse carrying a woman, dressed as a man, trousers and all, darted from the woods and fled away from them. Light brown hair flew behind her as she shouted warning. "Robin Redbreasts!" Henry spurred his horse harder until a halted carriage came into view. Liveried servants emerged quickly from the trees with chaotic explanations of what had happened. Henry silenced the rattled men. "Where did they go?" The servants pointed in 3 different directions. Stevens took charge and drove his horse into the woods in one of the indicated directions. "This way! They have raised a trail!" The other patrolman followed Stevens into the trees without a backward glance. Henry, however, approached a white-haired gentleman standing bewildered beside the carriage. "Sir, can you tell me where the thieves fled and what they took?" The old man nodded.
"The ruffians absconded with more than 10,000 guineas. They fled into the woods just there." He pointed toward the trees opposite from where Stevens had gone. Henry recognized the telltale signs of passing horses. He tipped his hat to the man. "Thank you, sir. My name is Henry Beaumont, and I will pursue your attackers to the world's end, if I must. You have my word." The gentleman dipped his head in gratitude and bid good fortune as Henry spurred his horse into the woods. Chapter 2. Lucy sagged in her saddle, weary from 3 hours of hard riding through forest and fields, skirting towns and villages along the way. The pack-horse tugged at the lead in her left hand, perhaps tired of its burden. Lucy bolted upright when Stedman and his horse emerged from the trees after a brief reconnaissance. The utter annoyance painting his features answered her unasked question. "The Redbreast still follows," he said. "The man is relentless. I have no recourse but to draw him away." Before she could register the import of Stedman's decision, he slid a rapier into her belt. "We part ways here." Her eyes flew wide with alarm. "But I don't know where I am, or where I am going." He shook his head and smiled softly. "You underestimate yourself, as usual." He pointed into the trees. "That direction, no more than a mile away, lies the Thames. Turn east, follow the river, but stay off the roads. Within 2 hours you should arrive at Gravesend. Wait for us in the meadow behind Milton Chantry, and try to believe in Lucy Locket as much as I do." Before she could ask the 1,000 questions clanging through her brain, the forest swallowed Stedman. She heaved a stuttering sigh and urged the horses in the direction he had indicated. Within minutes she found the Thames and moved eastward through fields and wood, slowed by hedges of stone piled by possessive farmers to mark their territory. Chaos shaped her thoughts. What would become of Stedman if he were caught? Wasn't the penalty for highway robbery still death? What would become of her, regardless of outcomes? Arriving at yet another low wall, she dismounted to coax the horses over the stones. As she prepared to remount, a shout froze her. "Bow Street Patrol! Lay down your weapon!" Lucy lifted her eyes to find a lanky young man, clad in a long blue coat and red waistcoat of Bow Street Horse Patrol, emerging from the trees. He was on foot and armed with a sabre. Sunlight glinted from his auburn hair as he levelled blue eyes and his weapon at her. She could not help but notice what a fine figure he cut in his uniform, despite his ill intentions. "Lay down your weapon," he repeated. She glanced to her right hand with surprise to find the rapier in her grip, raised in defence. When had she retrieved it? She stared at the stranger in horror. "I am not a thief." In response, he stepped forward with his sword. Lucy panicked, even as her training from Stedman assumed control. As the Redbreast swung his sabre, with the clear intention of disarming her, she slipped sideways and slashed his greatcoat, laying open the garment from chest to waist. His look of surprise quickly clouded. "I do not wish to kill a woman, but will if necessary." She stared at him with fear and determination, while maintaining a fencer's stance. He lunged at her forward thigh, a move typically intended to disable without killing. As he did so, she slipped aside again, caught his blade near the guard with the centre of her rapier and twisted it from his grasp. He glanced with apparent shock at his empty fingers before stooping almost languidly to retrieve his weapon. Although equally shocked by her success, Lucy heeded Stedman's training. She brought down the hilt of the rapier sharply against the base of the man's skull. He glanced up with a startled half-smile before crumpling face first to the earth. Lucy breathed rapidly while waiting for him to rise. When he did not, she prodded him with her rapier. A muffled moan was his only response. She plunged her blade into the earth, grabbed the sides of her head, and began to pace wildly. "What have I done? Oh, what have I done?" The man moaned again, and his hand spasmed to clench dirt. She froze, trying to summon reason. He could regain sensibility soon, and then what? He would apprehend her. She would be forced to disclose Stedman's identity. Stedman would be hounded by Bow Street until he swung from the hangman's noose. She would suffer an uncertain fate. Or an alternative course of action unfolded in her mind, like a great dog uncurling from a nap. The absurd notion imbued her with an insight that promised a narrow window of escape for Stedman and freedom for her. The red breast's increasing movement gave her no time to vet the idea. She retrieved her rapier, stepped toward him, and planted the point of the weapon in the hollow of his throat just as he rolled to his back. His blinking eyes stilled when he recognized the steel at his neck. He swept his gaze from her face to her feet and back again. Despite his perilous condition, he smirked. "In what gutter did they find you?" Henry winced as the woman's dark eyes flashed at his insult. She seemed a wild thing, with brown hair drawn into a ragged braid, and her form swallowed whole by an oversized shirt and loose trousers. However, smudges of dirt on her cheeks served to highlight a pert nose and startling eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Under other circumstances, he could lose an afternoon in the study of such a face. "Shut your bone box, cock robin," she said through gritted teeth, "before I change my mind." Henry seethed before discipline returned him from the brink. He could not allow his base nature to rise up, to sink its teeth into him, to drag him into darkness. Putting away criminals like her was the surest path to retaining his tenuous hold on integrity. Asserting his rank was the staunchest defence against his brother's claims of his unworthiness. He gathered calm and lifted his chin. "I am the son of an earl, not Cock Robin. You will address me as Sir, as befits my station." She raised her eyebrows in mock surprise. "The son of an almighty earl? If only I had known. I would have called to the kitchen for tea and scones." "Is that not your job, delivering tea and scones?" Her nostrils flared. "Self-righteous prig! Even in the face of death you believe yourself lord and master of all those you survey, and me, a mere worm to be trod beneath your overly expensive boots." In her indignation, the tip of the rapier drifted away from his neck. "You, apparently, lack the good sense to hold your tongue long enough to return alive to your pampered life, where you may resume self-serving leisure while crushing common folk beneath your heel. Your arrogance is matched only by your astounding stupidity." His resolve nearly buckled as the accusation stirred the demons in his soul. He inhaled a calming breath and raised his chin farther. "I will not be lectured by a failed scullery maid. You should return at once to the gutter from which you escaped before your father misses you in his bed." When the rapier's point pressed again into the hollow of his throat, Henry admitted that he had likely overplayed his hand with his tactical bluster. His strategy to unnerve her with bravado was failing badly. Her trembling hand grew coldly still. "Despite my utter disdain for you, sir," she said, "I offer you a choice between life and death." "You would not kill me." She clenched her jaw and pressed the blade more firmly into his neck. "How can you be so certain?" "Because though you ride with thieves, your eyes give you away. There is no violence in them." "And you are the expert on violent eyes?" He grimaced. "Yes, unfortunately." The pressure on his throat lifted as she seemed to waver. He cleared his loosened vocal cords. "You wish to make an offer?" She pursed her lips in apparent consideration before nodding. "I do. I propose to spare your life. In return, you ride with me to London with the stolen coins and help us avoid any who might pursue, criminal and redbreast alike." "A reasonable offer, I believe." "But you must agree to my terms." He narrowed his eyes. "And those are?" "That upon our safe arrival in London we part ways, and pretend we never met." The proposal raised bile in Henry's throat. An agreement with a thief was just the sort of action he had long feared, the first stumble down a slippery slope into the depths of criminality. However, he did not wish to die just yet. A devil's deal for certain. My life in exchange for abdication of my duty and the soiling of my honour. She smiled grimly. I doubt your honour is above soiling, Lord Virtue. Few of the gentry are as pure as that. And you know this from experience? Yes, unfortunately. Henry watched her for a moment longer. What's your name? You don't require my name. That is my condition. Or you can just kill me. Those dark eyes grew darker still as a storm raged behind them. Her generous lips parted for the space of several breaths before she answered. Lucy. He nodded. Right then, Lucy of Shooter's Hill. I accept your desperate offer, terms and all. Swear by your mother's name that you will honour all points of our agreement. You do not trust my word. I would sooner trust a pickpocket. Very well, he said with a lofty sigh. I swear by my mother's name. She continued to eye him. Do you even love your mother, Lord Dandy? I never knew my mother. Deep pain stirred, but he swept it aside. However, I would walk through hell's fire to have known her for even a single day. Lucy seemed to consider his frank reply. Her hardened features softened to reveal a comely face that might even prove capable of a warm smile. She sighed and removed the rapier from his throat. In a single abrupt movement, he collected his sabre, bounded to his feet, and levelled it at her chest. The immediate hurt in Lucy's eyes unnerved him. But you promised, she said woefully. She was right, of course, and breaking a vow was just another step on the downward path of the fallen. After the space of a few heartbeats, he lowered his sabre and sheathed it. I did promise. Now let's get on with this before I regret that fact more than I already do. Shall I help you mount your horse, or does Her Highness wish a gold carriage? I require no such help, thank you. Inform me if you require assistance mounting yours. She seized the leader of the pack-horse and swung into her saddle with a fluid motion that startled Henry. Let us go, then, Robin Redbreast. She nudged her horse ahead into the trees without glancing back, pulling the pack-horse behind. Henry rode in silence for some time, trailing her through dense woods. Do you know where you are going? He finally asked. Yes. A southwesterly course will lead us back to the Dover Highway and away from where the others plan to meet. You fear your gang will not understand your actions, then? She tucked her chin. Very much so. Her fear was all too familiar. His every action as a child had been second-guessed by his judgmental brother. And are you certain our trajectory is southwesterly? Of course, Sir Skeptic. Why? Are you lost? Physically, yes, he replied, but morally, no. She cast a glare at him over one shoulder, clearly peeved. Over the ensuing minutes, Henry's eyes returned frequently to the pack-horse laden with bags containing 10,000 gold coins, and his low regard for her sank further. Finally, he could bite his tongue no longer. It seems the proverb is untrue. She glanced back at him. Which proverb is that? The one that says there is honour among thieves, but here you are, stealing from your fellows. I am no thief, she shot back. But then perhaps you view anyone not of the haute ton as a thief. He chuckled dryly. I did not call you a thief. However, I did imply you were worse than one, stealing for yourself what was obtained by all. She halted her horse and glared at him again, her dark eyes firing arrows into his soul. You know nothing of me. Nothing whatsoever. The coins are not for me. For whom, then? Your friends? Your family? Will you shower the poor with riches as a modern-day Robin Hood? She continued to attack him with those lively eyes, apparently incredulous at his words. The coins are for you to return to Bow Street with no mention of me. Her simple reply struck him like a fist. His regret flared until she offered another caveat. "I request only—"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?